time back to reviewing Transformers games after my break from them. For this entry of forgotten games that fall under the Transformers umbrella, we'll be talking about the Wii and 3DS version of Dark of the Moon, that being Stealth Force Edition. Quick rant, I have no idea why it's called Stealth Force. Did Michael Bay even know what stealth is? Stealth mode is the opposite of stealth. Transforming into a living vehicle weapon and firing is everything but stealth. I think they only called it Stealth Force because it sounded cool and it would probably invoke toy sales. The movies are supposed to sell toys after all. End of tangent. So like most Transformers games since 2007, I played this game on my Wii back in the day. And you want to know what I thought of it? I thought it was pretty solid and actually better than what I expected it to be. I found it to be an enjoyable vehicle shooter. I've never played Twisted Metal or any other vehicle shooters, so I have no way of knowing whether or not this is distinct in the genre, but on its own, I'd say I had a relatively good time with it. Then years later, I watched Diamond Bolt's video on Transformers games, and you want to know how he describes Stealth Force Edition? You really want to know? He said the game received negative reviews from critics, which shocked me. It seems I enjoyed this game more than the average player. Did I have bad standards, or did I see something in the game others didn't? So recently I went back to this game to record a review and I still don't see what the outcry was about. Keep in mind, playing Transformers on DS was a more nostalgic experience for me. I didn't remember much about Stealth Force Edition beyond the basic gameplay and plot. If you're looking for a negative review of this game because you hated it, well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. This is going to be a strictly, brutally honest review of the game from my perspective. I didn't look that much into why people didn't like this game. Maybe it had something to do with its length. This game is like an hour shorter than the Transformers Prime game, meaning that it's an hour and a half, even shorter than the DS games ironically. Okay, so that's not bad. Maybe it's quality over quantity. Playing the game, I gotta say, I think this game is perfectly reasonable for what it is if you spent $10 maximum for this game, and $15 if we're pushing it. But I have the feeling that they charge more for this damn game at game stores, which is probably why everyone except me who paid full price came back home, played it, and was disappointed. If you want to try this game, do yourself a favor and just emulate it. The shipping for a physical copy isn't worth it. So let's get into my extended thoughts on the game. What I immediately noticed is that the soundtrack is exactly the same as the DS version. I guess they were really strapped for time. Anyhow, I start up a game, and we've got a first level which is essentially a tutorial, in our one and only mission as Mirage, with the same fake Italian or whatever accent that makes my ears bleed. First impressions, it's passable. It's kinda crap that you only have Mirage for the tutorial, but given the game has 18 missions, I think you could have had at least one additional mission. This part is basically to get used to the controls. At first they were kinda clunky, but I adapted to it relatively quickly in the second mission, where we play as Bumblebee. It's here where I should probably explain how the game works. Basically, you can't be in robot mode in this game. Simple. You can switch between vehicle mode and stealth mode, and the same is true for the enemies. In every short but sweet mission, you are required to pull off an objective that is, you can either shoot what feels like pellets from a paintball gun, or you can fire rockets, resulting in more damage. The driving is okay, it isn't too slippery, but it is a bit too rigid. What I mean is that the turning isn't sharp enough. That's probably what resulted in me colliding with objects often, because I couldn't make a swift turn. But that's really my only gripe with the driving. Being in stealth mode costs energy, and that means you will basically be screwed if it runs out. Thankfully, Energon across levels replenishes your energy and health at the same time. The Energon replenishing is sizable enough, so in most missions, you'll stay above the depletion limit. So what do I think of the gameplay loop? It's passable. The thing about this game is that it's nothing special, but it's not a bad game in the slightest, at least in my opinion. Its only critical flaw is that it's too short, and that's really the only thing I give the game major flack for. I do wish that every enemy had a health bar, because all of them besides the weakest enemy type take like 10 plus seconds to kill, and you can't tell how much damage you have to do to the more buffed up enemies. 10 seconds sounds short, but when you're in a game trying to mow down enemies, it gets tedious. But then again, rockets will do the trick half the time. I said half because it won't kill bigger enemies instantly. The game is a bit too easy, with me only failing around thrice, and I'm the type of guy who sucks at games. So a vehicle shooter player will have an easier time than me, presumably. Like in the DS port, you can only play as land vehicles, which is a missed opportunity. I have a suspicion that this game was made for both the Wii and 3DS. That the weaker system caused both versions to be downgraded. That's a theory, but it makes sense. As for the story, it's basically the same as the DS version, except presented quite a bit better, with the artwork and the like, but it's not that much better. As for actual levels, missions are copy-pasted locations with different objectives. I think we revisited a recycled level like 3 times, and that got old, even though 2 of them had one of my most hated video game tropes ever. The defend this defenseless object from enemies trope. It was not frustrating at all though. That's because although it was under constant attack, it had a sizable health bar and the time limit was short enough. One mission was basically a timed endurance test, and all you had to do was drive fast and collect energon. That's it. And for context, the map was so damn small, so it's not like I had much to go to. As for the ratio, the characters in story mode is pretty bad. I didn't count, but it felt like the Autobot missions outnumbered the Decepticon ones, as well as 4 Autobots compared to 3 Decepticons. It's the same problem Rise of the Darkspark had, essentially. So they didn't equally iron out the perspectives. What I can say is that the game's story is paced far better than the DS version, because the switch of perspectives means it's keeping an immersive flow, even though it's nowhere near as good as Fall of Cybertron, when it did that. Again, it's just passable in its final quality, so what I've hopefully pointed out to you is that the game isn't as bad as people says it is. I just think the under-delivery of the game probably got it more scorn than it deserved. I know a lot of you wanted me to rip into this game, but I don't hate or even dislike it. I don't think it's a bad game. I'd say it's average, if anything. So I ended up giving this game a 6 out of 10. Sorry if you wanted something a little more aggressive directed towards this game, but you came to look at an honest man's review of a game. And this is personally what I think it is. The graphics are fine, the gameplay is fine, the length is too short, but besides from the length, there's nothing overtly bad about it. Maybe the controls are crappier on the 3DS, but I don't know and I don't care to test it out. Given the contrast between it and Dark of the Moon DS, I guess this is a huge step up, and it might have influenced my opinion, but I reaffirm that this game isn't the terrible shit stain everyone thinks it is. Oh, and as for the co-op feature, to my recollection, it was essentially as primitive as the original Halo game. That being, it creates artificial replay value, and they only use select missions for the co-op mode instead of, you know, the whole thing. So that's my simplified thoughts on Transformers Dark of the Moon Stealth Force Edition. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?